From Townsville's humble beginnings in 1864 to the present day, the city has experienced a growth rate that rivalled other centres in the north. John Melton Black, employed by Robert Towns at Woodstock Station, dispatched Andrew Ball, Mark Watt Reed and a small party of Aboriginals to search for a site where a suitable port could be established. Ball's party reached the mouth of Ross Creek in April 1864, setting up a camp below the rocky spur of Melton Hill near the present Customs House on the Strand. After further exploration of the surrounding area, Ball returned to Woodstock Station and reported discovery of a favourable site for the settlement. So Townsville was born, and with it came the construction of some of the iconic residences, many of which are still standing today. Early construction of buildings in Townsville fell to two main firms, Tunbridge Architects and local hardware merchants Rooney and Company. The firm owes its establishment to the work and foresight of three young Irishmen named Rooney, with the biblical Christian names of John, Jacob and Matthew. Renowned local historian and published author Dr. Dorothy Gibson Wild explains the early days of Tunbridge and Rooney's involvement in the construction of Townsville.
And their first firm, we're not quite sure where it was, but that opened in 1872 and they moved down further down East Flinders Street, and that was their major factory for furniture making and also for building construction. And they also had a timber mill there, but it was too small. So then they transferred to Railway Estate, and it was there that so much of the timber for North Queensland houses and public buildings, whatever, that was milled, and they would bring the logs in from all over the place, including from the west coast of America. They would bring logs in and they would be cut into timber, whatever size of timber. They had different milling machines, and that was done in that mill later on South Railway Estate rather, and in East Flinders Street early on. And then of course they moved into prefabrication, and they were the earliest firm in North Queensland to make prefabricated buildings. Prior to that they all came from the south, particularly from Maryborough. So Rooney's were a very important firm, and they are extremely important in the economy of North Queensland.
Local resident Jerry Reeves has been working as a carpenter in Townsville for over 70 years. He prides himself in keeping traditional skills alive in his garment workshop.
Jerry, you were born here in Townsville in 1928?
Born in McKillop Street, Belgian Gardens, Townsville.
And you've worked on the tools as a carpenter joiner for about 70 years now?
Just about.
Just about?
Just about.
And your dad before you was...
He started the business in 1st of February 1931.
And you were telling me about the machinery. You moved most of the machinery to this shed about 25 years ago?
That's right.
When your dad passed away?
My mum and dad passed away.
Yep.
Well, originally in the old workshop we had two motors that drove the whole workshop through line shafts on the ceiling with belt feed down to every machine. And every machine run 8 hours a day. When I shifted out here, every machine had to be motorised. And it was a pretty big job.
But a lot of the machinery in this shed today is about 80 or 90 years old.
Well, some of them would be over 100.
Some of them over 100.
Yeah.
And you still work on all those machines now?
That's right.
And you do all the mortise and tenon joints and everything the way they were done?
The proper way. Well, the old machinery, as I say, it's just as good as any. You got the tenon machine, it cuts the tenon machine, it cuts the tenons. You got the mortise machine, it does the mortising. You got the spindle moulders that mould it for whatever shape you might want to be doing, whether it's for joinery or mouldings. And it's virtually the same as what all the new stuff is, only it's just not as modern, but it does just as good a job. All the material we used was northern softwoods, mostly silky oak or maple. The best for the trade. Occasionally a bit of cedar, which was very hard to get at the time. They cut it all out many years before that. And I've used silky oak exclusively just about ever since. I started my apprenticeship at 15. I did a normal 5 years course and then a post-apprentice course after to allow you to be a foreman or anything like that. And a total of 6 years or 6.5 years, something like that. Where the boys today, if they've done a senior, they only do 3 years and they don't learn anything. We had to do it and do it properly or you didn't have a job. That's all it boiled down. Well, there's nobody to hand it down. Fortunately, there's nobody to hand it down. My youngest son is a fitter and turner, works at the Townsville General Hospital as maintenance there, and my eldest boy is a contractor electrician. There's nobody to follow me on. What happens then, I don't know.
Mortise and tenon joints were a key component in the construction of early buildings in Townsville. Today, we are going to see how these joints are made using a combination of hand and electric tools. First, the timber is selected for the straightness of the grain and the carpenter carefully avoids sections with knots and other imperfections. The timber is then marked out using a pencil and square. Then, the hole or mortise is roughly drilled out using a 1-inch spade bit. This is drilled deep enough to accommodate the tenon. After the holes have been drilled to the required depth, the remainder of the waste material is removed using a 25mm chisel. After the rough work has been completed, the mortise is given a final trim to ensure the tenon fits tightly. Now the mortise is complete, it is time to mark out the tenon which forms the other half of the joint. Once again, we use the square ruler and pencil to mark the cuts. Next, a handsaw is used to remove the waste material from around the tenon. Now that the two halves of the joint have been completed, it's time to put the two halves together. A perfect fit. Now all that remains is to glue and nail the joint for years of reliability.